Welcome to Weekend Drive for the fourth week in February 2026. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Kellen Walker. Joining me today are automotive news reporter Larry Velaquette, who covers Toyota, Subaru, and Mazda for us. Larry, so good to see you, sir.
Jake, it's great to see you in front of the camera today.
It's nice to be on this side. Michael Martinez, who covers Ford in the UAW for us at Automotive News. Mike, thanks so much for coming back.
Hey, Jake.
All right, guys, let's dive in. So, Mike, I wanted to start with you on tariffs. We've covered this on the show extensively this week from almost every conceivable angle, but since last week, a lot has happened. We saw the Supreme Court ruling striking down Trump's reciprocal tariffs, leaving a lot of questions about refunds, especially. Companies are waiting on guidance from the Court of International Trade on how to get their money back. Mike, I'm curious, what's your take on how this plays out for auto companies and the supply chain?
Jake, I'm really not sure. I'm not sure anybody is, but I think the point is if you are affected by this, don't hold your breath on a refund. Even if you get one, you're probably not going to be able to keep that money long because President Trump has said quite plainly that he still intends to impose new tariffs, just in a different way. Obviously, the Supreme Court has closed off one path for him. But as we know, he has tariffs under, 4 or 5 different statutes and laws and things of that nature. So he's just going to do it another way. So even if you get money back, you're still going to be spending big on tariffs in the coming years. So don't spend it on something else.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, that not only are new tariffs in place, but there's just so much uncertainty about what happens next, right? I mean, if you were planning on making investments anyway, it seems like it would be tough to try to allocate any money to anything at this point.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Larry, any thoughts on this refund situation, where we go from here?
Here's what I would say. If companies want to know how they're going to get their refund, they need to only watch the sons of the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who spent the better part of the last year out buying up tariff liabilities at pennies on the dollar, so that in case this policy got ruled unconstitutional, they would have the asset, the liability, the outstanding refund asset to cash in at dollars on the dollar. So if anybody's going to figure out how to get a refund, it's going to be the kids of the Commerce Secretary. So watch that space.
Now, this is what I wanted to sort of spend the meat of this first part of the show on with you guys. And it has to do with Stellantis and them confirming a big loss. Mike, they confirmed this week at Stellantis that the UAW workers won't receive any profit-sharing checks for the first time since 2011. And of course, Stellantis was not a company named Stellantis back in 2011. The automaker lost about $2.2 billion in North America last year. Meanwhile, Ford and GM workers are seeing their checks drop significantly too, but I guess at least they're getting checks. Walk us through what's happening here and what it means for labor relations with the big three.
Yeah, this is an especially wild and cruel swing because these workers were getting record payments just a few years ago. In fact, for 3 straight years, Stellantis workers were making the most. I think 22, 23, and 24, all for the prior year's financial results. But you take a look at this, and I was trying to come up with how I was going to slice up the blame pie here, right? Who would get the biggest slice? And I think you can't discount President Trump and tariffs. Stellantis took a $1.4 billion hit. They're an international company having to import many of their products to the United States. Costs a lot more. Drug down earnings, led to negative profit margins, especially in North America. So that would be a pretty big slice. But I think an even bigger slice would go to Carlos Tavares, because even as tariffs did kind of happen overnight, or at least last year, that didn't happen before last year, the rest of this, how Stellantis got in this situation, did not happen overnight. And it was a lot of cascading product decisions under Tavares' leadership that has led to steadily declining sales. He got rid of the Hemi, right? He tried to make Dodge an all EV brand. He has not invested, many people did not invest in the Chrysler brand. So there's many reasons why Stellantis is in a bad position today. And I think you can point a lot of the blame to him. think some of the blame may have to go to Sean Fain too. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying the auto workers, they are blameless in this. And it's a terrible situation that they're in this year, especially because many of them do come to rely on these, which essentially function as bonus checks, right? But I think you go back to those 2023 contracts and all of Sean Fain's bluster and, getting every cent he could from the automakers. The conversation inside the auto industry, sort of off the record around that time, was that, hey, we're giving up a lot of money here and it's good for the auto workers. They'll get this win today. But what happens tomorrow and the next few years? Like, as companies, we're going to have to look elsewhere to make business sense. This is before tariffs, before Trump, right? And the idea was this may be a short-term gain, but long-term pain, because it could lead to fewer jobs and it could lead to significantly higher labor costs for the companies, which will hurt their bottom line. So that's how I would slice it up. I don't know if you guys feel any different, but there's a lot of factors involved in this. I didn't even touch on the EV situation, which technically didn't impact the profit sharing checks because it was a sort of financial trick. They listed it as a special item, so that doesn't impact North America margins. But you can say that EVs impacted it because they invested heavily, cost them a lot of money, they didn't sell as well, led to lower sales. So a lot of factors there.
I mean, when you talk about the negative margin that I think it was 3.9% or somewhere in the threes, you could see maybe EVs contributed to that because EVs just aren't profitable. So any EVs they're selling are not helping with the negative margin, right? I mean, speaking of the blame pie, when I look at social media here and around Metro Detroit, all the comment sections seem to be divided, politically speaking, in two ways. One is people saying this is all Trump's fault because of tariffs. Other people saying this is all Biden's fault for pushing EVs so much. And so, and obviously, like you said, the write-downs, not part of that, but it's, it seems like that's where people are divided. So how do we make sense of that, Mike?
Yeah, the truth's somewhere in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't blame the $20-some billion write-down, but you can blame the fact that not everybody wanted EVs, not nearly to the extent that Stellantis and Ford and GM and everybody else thought they would. So the investment in those vehicles that still have not turned a profit for anybody hurt. And who was pushing investment in electric vehicles? The Biden administration. You can't deny that. Just as you can't deny that the Trump administration's tariffs have significantly hurt businesses by adding a lot of extra costs. So yeah, it's not one or the other. It's somewhere in between.
Well, and it's also the policy shift too, right? That if Trump had kept Biden's policies on EVs, they might not have fallen off the cliff, especially the federal tax credit too. So it's a complicated situation here, but it sounds like plenty of blame to go around. Now, Larry, you're down near Toledo. This is Stellantis Central down there.
It is. It's the largest market in the United States, where Stellantis is the number one market share, and Toyota is number 6.
Right. Well, there you go. So
yeah,
that sounds very flipped. But anyway,
yes.
Larry, talk about the mood down there. I mean, this has to sting for workers who have already been through a lot over the past few years with Stellantis.
Well, yeah, of course, these are bonuses, right? So if these workers were counting on this bonus to make their boat payment or to, buy an engagement ring or do anything that like a one-time purchase, that's their fault for thinking that it's permanent, right? I mean, they're bonuses. They're profit sharing by definition. And in order to be there, there has to be profits. I will say locally, it's going to be a big hit. I mean, the payroll is still coming in. We have thousands and thousands of Chrysler employees in my metro area between the two halves of the giant assembly plant. There's a parts plant in in the southern suburb and an engine plant in the northern suburb. It's a very Chrysler centric community, and we'll feel that lack of income. But I do want to go back to a point that Mike said, which is, we talk about the blame here. We have to be careful of two things. Number one, these profit sharing formulas go back further than the Great Recession. they were simplified. I think it was Ron Gettelfinger's administration that simplified the formula so that $1 billion of automaker profit led to $1,000 of bonus, so that everybody could understand what the hell they were getting. That's one thing. These go back a long way. And when they were introduced as a way to align the interests of the workers with the interests of the company, right? Everybody, if the company makes money, everybody wins. Company loses money, well, we all share the pain, right? And that's a good negotiating strategy, on paper, but it has consequences when we go into downturns. And this is still a cyclical industry. We haven't had a really serious cycle since 2009, but it's still a cyclical industry. And so these are the pitfalls of this. The workers, they're kind of victims in this because they don't have any say in strategy, right? If I'm in a profit sharing situation where part of my compensation depends on how the company does, and the company makes asinine decisions that I don't take part of, I end up paying for them indirectly, but I'm I catch that heat. So they don't have any say in how the company's run. They do have a say in quality and maybe, to borrow a term from my companies, finding kaizens in there, to make them more efficient. But those have very little effect on that bottom line number.
Jake, I would say in a previous life when I was at the Detroit News every year around this time, they would have me go talk to boat stores and camper stores to see what sort of impact profit sharing had on the region. And it was significant. A lot of people did spend on those big ticket purchases that Larry mentioned. But even beyond that, not everybody went out to buy a boat. Some people would bank that money because you have to remember every 4 years you have a contract negotiation and there's the risk of a strike where you may not be getting paid. I know plenty of workers that would try to bank some profit sharing and bank bonus money so they would have something to fall back on if their company went on strike and they were without a paycheck for a while. So this definitely stings. I don't want to make light of it at all, but it almost is reminiscent of Clark Griswold trying to put in a pool for his family, needs that bonus check. All it gets was membership to the Jelly of the Month Club. And you can argue that this is an even worse situation because these guys don't even get a Jelly of the Month Club membership.
Where's the Tylenol, right? That's certainly maybe a question being asked around the country, especially here in the Midwest, a lot this week. Well, we'll keep on top of this, guys. Coming up, we're going to talk about Asian automakers making some big bets on pickups and SUVs, Hyundai with a mid-size pickup, and Nissan with dual versions of the Pathfinder. That's next on Weekend Drive.
Chinese automakers want to enter the U.S. market, but the path forward is anything but clear. On this week's episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast, Lei Xing, an independent analyst and co-host of the China, EVs, and More podcast, explains the real obstacles to Chinese vehicles reaching American driveways, including the Commerce Department ban. He also explains why the threat from Chinese automakers might be overblown.
Coming in and getting a foothold is only the beginning, but from there until you establish yourself as a kind of an Americanized brand, I think that'll take decades.
I'm Molly Boygan. Join me on Shift, available this Sunday wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Weekend Drive. I'm Jake Neer with Larry Velaquette and Michael Martinez. All right, guys, let's shift gears a little bit here to product strategy. Now, Larry, Nissan announced plans this week. Well, actually, they didn't really announce it. Our own Urvaksh Karkaria broke this story, as he does often.
And Nissan doesn't get to announce anything with Urvaksh around.
That's right. Shout out to Urvaksh. They are planning to sell 2 distinct Pathfinders starting mid-2029, an updated unibody version and a new body-on-frame model. They're essentially mirroring Toyota's approach here with the Highlander and the 4Runner. Nissan says they want to capture 33 to 40% of Toyota's combined volume in that space. Larry, I got to ask, how realistic is that goal?
I wish them well.
Enough said.
There's certainly a competition, right, in that space, but careers have been staked on trying to beat Toyota at its own game. I don't know that anybody's ever done it that I can recall, with the possible exception of Tesla, who killed the Prius when they first came out with the Model S years ago. But I'll say that Nissan's approach here is they're capitalizing on a very popular nameplate. I don't know how you differentiate to a consumer the difference between a body on frame and a unibody, when there are a lot of auto reporters that don't know the difference between a body on frame and a unibody and how they're put together, right? And why they are how they are. So it's going to be it's an interesting strategy. Let's put it this way. Will it work? We wish them luck.
Nissan moved away from body on frame back in 2012 for the Pathfinder. Now they're going back to it more than a decade later. Mike, what's your read on this? Does this tell us something about how the midsize SUV market has evolved?
Sure. And we've seen other vehicles, thinking of the Ford Explorer, right? Or even the Escape, how that's sort of evolved over the years, obviously different segment. But, I think it's a smart strategy. And again, not apples to apples, but you look at what Ford did with Bronco, or you look at what they've done with some of the other nameplates. Their whole idea now is to build families of vehicles, a Bronco family, where you have a rugged body on frame Bronco, you have a smaller unibody Bronco Sport, something different for different needs. You have the Mustang family of vehicles. We've reported that's going to expand further in the coming years. So conceptually, I think it's a good idea. You can divide and conquer in the segment, but you have to make them distinct. You have to give consumers a reason to choose one or the other and not cannibalize yourself. So will they beat up on Toyota? Probably not, but can they still have success? Sure. I think it's a good strategy.
Back in the day, they had the Xterra, right? That was their off-roader. And the only reason you build a body on frame vehicle and, name it the same thing is you want an off-road version, and you want a version that, is all-wheel drive and that, will go through snow. The off-road version was the Xterra. They killed that in 2015. Now there's some thought that they're going to bring it back, but you had a product there that was a legitimate contender back in the day. And I don't understand this naming strategy to double up on Pathfinder and confuse the hell out of consumers.
Well, I was going to say, I think that to your point, Larry, and to Mike's point, both, they have to find a way to distinguish and market these things without using the words unibody and body on frame, clearly.
Yeah.
I also want to talk a little bit about Hyundai. Speaking of body on frame pickups, that sort of thing. Hyundai confirmed that it's bringing a mid-size pickup to the U.S. by 2026. This puts them head-to-head with the Ranger, Colorado, Tacoma, and now Canyon. Mike, I'm curious, what's driving Hyundai's confidence, do you think, that there's room for another player in this really crowded segment right now?
I wish I knew, because I'm not so sure that they should have confidence for many of the same reasons we talked about Nissan. Look, what Hyundai's tried to do in the pickup space has simply not worked on the smaller side. Clearly, the Santa Cruz was way too overpriced, particularly compared to the Maverick, and Maverick ran laps around it. So they need to learn from that mistake moving up to the midsize. Again, everything they've tried to do so far in the truck space has been unibody. I don't think that'll work on midsize. You see the Ridgeline isn't exactly lighting the world on fire, but our colleague Richard Truitt had a story on this week, and he put it into visual numbers with a graph, and it showed that this midsize segment has not evolved since prior to COVID. Their sales are up slightly compared to 2019, but that's not what you want to hear with the addition of a Ranger and a Jeep Gladiator. And if those pretty well established brands can't find success in the truck space, I don't think Hyundai is going to be able to, unless they do something that Richard said. I thought it was a great idea. And I did not know about this because I don't pay too much attention to the African market, but Kia sells a body-on-frame truck. They're called the Tasman. It looks awesome. Again, this is my ignorance. This is the first time I'm seeing it. It's boxy, body-on-frame, looks cool. I think they could have success if they would bring that over here with a Hyundai badge. You'd have to build it here because of tariffs, so it would be a win for the Trump administration and be a win for U.S. auto workers, and you could probably expand the lineup by whatever you put in that plant to rugged SUVs. So I think that would be a great opportunity if Hyundai would take that route and stay far away from whatever they tried to do with the Santa Cruz.
Larry, I know you've got thoughts on the pickup battle, especially thinking back to the Maverick and Santa Cruz, but what are your thoughts about Hyundai entering the midsize truck market?
So to Mike's point, I think the thing holding them back is also they don't have a body on frame plant. They only have unibody plants, like most automakers. So like Volkswagen with the Amarok, they basically outsourced that to Ford because they didn't have any place to build it anymore. And you'd run into the same thing here unless you got a very flexible line and were able to pull it off that you could put a body on frame line in a unibody plant somewhere. So I don't know that's a possibility, but I will say this. We talked about this before when we talked about Maverick. There is a white space in the market right now for a compact body on frame pickup, not a mid-size pickup like Ranger and Tacoma, but a true compact body on frame pickup with, 3,500 pounds of towing, et cetera, they would be able to do with a body on frame lineup instead of a car based one like the Santa Cruz and the Maverick. That right now is white space in the entire U.S. market. If you're going to put a new vehicle in, go where your competition isn't. That's where they aren't, right? You're not going to dethrone, even after the war that was the midsize pickup over the last 15 years, right? The Detroit 3 all pulled out of that segment. Then they all came back in. And when they came back in, Tacoma had a 54% market share when they decided to come back. And they've regained some of it, but Tacoma's still in the 40s. It's, they gave up that segment like they did with sedans, and they did it voluntarily, and it was boneheaded.
There's another point here that truck customers are more loyal than customers of other vehicle types, right? So
the Kelvin test, right?
Know exactly what you're talking about immediately.
It's the Kelvin test that's on the back of every truck window. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. So you're going to have to give them a really good reason to switch. And to Larry's point, the Detroit 3 got out. Now they're back in. By the time we get this midsize from Hyundai, you're going to have a new Dodge Dakota too. So give them a good reason. And I don't know. We obviously haven't seen the plans yet, but they're going to have to come up with one.
I'm getting this image of, you guys know the movie Gangs of New York?
Oh, yeah.
The 5 points and all the gangs are meeting there in the middle, and they're in the middle of this Royal Rumble in the middle of the streets. And then like Hyundai's over here, 10 years later walking in like, oh, let me get involved in this. Right?
Is it Gangs of New York or is it Anchorman?
All the yes, that works exactly well. Yeah, they're like the public TV station coming in at the end. I can say that as a former public media person myself. All right, guys, before we end off here, we have to talk about this one. Mike, you brought this to my attention. Ford announced this week it's now charging $495 to unlock the front trunk, or the frunk, as us EV enthusiasts like to call it, on the Mustang Mach-E. So the hardware, it's there. There's a frunk that's there, but if you want to actually use it, you have to pay an extra $500. Mike, what's going on here?
Well, it's easy to laugh at this, and I think we probably can and should a little bit, especially because this is sort of inside baseball, but Ford, when they announced this, had a press release that showed them filling the frunk up with cocktail shrimp and boneless wings, because the idea was, hey, use this at a tailgate party. They were trying to market a new technology on a new vehicle, right? So, at the end of the
cooler.
day, yeah, right.
Yeah. Have fun getting the smell out of that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Washing it would not be fun. But, once we get all the laughs out of the way, I don't mind this so much because all you got to do, right, it's an insert or whatever. And they have a heat pump in the Mach-E now. So it made the frunk smaller a couple years ago anyway. So you just take the frunk insert out anyway. I think we're going to see more of this because you have to remember two things with the Mach-E. One, it's built in Mexico, so it's subject to tariffs. So Ford needs to get costs down. And two, they're still losing money on every one they sell because it's an EV and that they have not found a way to be profitable on. So I think in this era of rising prices, you're going to see automakers do stuff like this. And you got to commend them because they've done the research and they found out people don't actually use this thing. Certainly not for cocktail shrimp and really not for anything else. My mom has a Mach-E. I don't think she's ever used the front. I think it would take her a couple minutes to figure out how to open it. So I think most customers are like that. And Ford is waving the white flag here saying, hey, we'll take it out. People don't use it. So standard, you don't got to deal with it. If you really want it, pay $500. That's a little unfair, but I don't think that many people really want it.
Larry, what are your thoughts?
From a purely logical standpoint, Mike is right. But this is my caution here. I hate subscription models. And I especially hate, I mean, I'm Midwest cheap, right? I was born Midwest cheap. I'll die Midwest cheap. I'm the kind of, I describe to people, my personality is I'm the kind of guy that'll look at a candy machine and choose something I don't like if there's a chance that two of them will fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, what I will say is that if your goal is a repeat customer who you want to come back, and if you don't treat them well and you abuse them on your purchase by saying, oh, here we put this equipment in your car that you just purchased, but we're not going to let you use it unless you give us another $20-$30 a month. That is the quickest way to get them to go somewhere else. Right? It drives me crazy. And all these automakers have built their future on believing that the subscription model in some form or another is going to save them, save their bottom lines down the road. And I look at that and I think, this is nuts. This is not going to work. If you're asking people to buy a giant capital vehicle, right? A really expensive product, and you say, oh, the only way this feature is going to work is if you give us more per month, or we're going to let you try this feature for a year, right? And then a year down the road, that now that you're addicted to it, then we're going to turn it off unless you give us more a month. It just pisses people off. If you don't wait, if Ford doesn't want the frunk in there, I totally get that. Mike's right, but yank it out. Don't, save the weight.
Well, I mean, again, to be fair though, this really isn't a subscription thing. This is a decontenting thing, right? Because they did yank it out, right? And it's not standard anymore. So you talk about,
but is it there, or is it physically there and not unlocked, or is it out?
No. They're not just going to lock it and not let you lift the hood. What it is.
Oh,
okay. All right.
It's a plastic piece that I don't know. I have not seen a Mach-E without a frunk. So I don't know if they are moving the heat pump and moving the battery and other things around, or if it'll just be sort of a weird opening that
empty space
something could go into.
Yeah. Reminds me of that old National Lampoon, buy this album or we'll kill this dog.
This is just the National Lampoon's version of Weekend Drive here. Of course,
Yeah.
When is it not, right? No, but yeah, I mean, this totally violates the one thing I've been saying for a long time now about these extra charges that automakers want to put on products is that, like, if you want to charge me for something new, fine. Like, if it's something that you're offering me that I haven't had before and you want me to, okay, I don't have to pay for it. But when you're taking things away to charge, maybe it's what you said, Larry. It's that they're counting on people liking these things and then not wanting them to go away. But also, as you said, that really ticks people off, I think. So I don't know. It's an interesting game they're playing here. But anyway, I really appreciate all of your insights today. Really good stuff, guys. Larry Veliquette, Mike Martinez, thanks again for joining me here on Weekend Drive.
Yep. Shout out to Kel. Happy off day.
Oh, yeah. The world traveler, Kel, getting some much deserved vacation time here. All right, well, that's Weekend Drive. I'm Jake Neer in for Kellen Walker. You can find all the stories we discussed today at autonews.com. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday for Daily Drive for a discussion about the barriers to Chinese EV entry to the U.S., featuring Lei Xing, an independent analyst and consultant on the Chinese auto industry, who says he thinks the threat to legacy automakers is exaggerated.
The Chinese, are they going to compete in the pickup, right? What sells in the U.S. market? I think it's only going to be slowly establishing a foothold. Then we can talk about Chinese being where the Koreans are today in the U.S. market.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.